Sabah Nur. It feels like Friday today. All right, good afternoon. The Secretary General is today, as we had told you, in St. Petersburg, participating in the International Economic Forum. During a panel discussion with other leaders, he stressed that globalization and technological progress have brought a lot of wealth and improved the situation of many, but that they also have increased inequalities among people and left people and certain countries behind. The Secretary General said that these inequalities are a threat to our global security, as are terrorism and climate change. In that context, he reiterated his determination to reform the United Nations in order to improve its capacity in preventing and resolving conflict. He also stressed the need to mobilize the business sector and civil society, along with states, and the implementation of the Agenda 2030 and the Paris Agreement on climate change. The panel discussion should be available on our UN Web TV site fairly soon. This evening, the Deputy Secretary General will depart New York for Geneva to participate in meetings with principals of Europe-based UN entities as well as member states. This engagement is part of the ongoing consultations concerning the repositioning of the UN development system in support of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and mandated by the 2016 Quadrennial Comprehensive Policy Review. The Deputy Secretary General will be back in New York Friday afternoon, tomorrow, Friday evening. And today, the report of the Secretary General entitled Reinvigorating the AIDS Response to Catalyze Sustainable Development and the UN Reform was presented to the General Assembly. The report notes that bold global commitments, shared financial responsibility, and people-centered approach have yielded shared successes in the response to AIDS. However, it also warns that there is a danger of optimism devolving into complacency. The Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, in presenting the report, said that AIDS as a pandemic is far from over, and stressed that countries need to do a better job of reaching young women and adolescent girls, as they are the ones who are bearing the brunt of the pandemic. Her remarks in the report are available online. And on a related note, our colleagues at UNHCR have signed an agreement with the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria to improve health services for refugees and other displaced communities. The agreement will strengthen UNHCR's humanitarian response to ensure refugees have access to treatment for HIV/AIDS, TB, and malaria. The two partners are already working together in Rwanda, where UNHCR is implementing a grant of $2.09 million from the Global Fund to address health needs for Burundian refugees in Rwanda. Further discussion also underway to expand the activities to the Middle East and other parts of East Africa. And I have a senior appointment to announce. The Secretary General has appointed Jan Beagle of New Zealand as his new Undersecretary General for Management. She is succeeding Yukio Takasu of Japan, to whom the Secretary General is grateful for his commitment and dedicated service to the United Nations. Ms. Beagle brings to the position more than 35 years of experience in the political, development, and interagency work of the United Nations, and she has made important contributions in leading and advancing change management initiatives in the Secretariat and at the level of the UN system. She is currently the Deputy Executive Director of the Joint UN Program on HIV/AIDS, otherwise known as UNAIDS. Prior to this position, she was Deputy Director General of the UN Office in Geneva and Assistant Secretary General for Human Resources Management from 2005 to 2007. We have her bio available, and we congratulate her on her appointment. And our colleagues from the African Union UN mission in Darfur report that yesterday a peacekeeper from Nigeria was killed by an unidentified group in a carjacking incident in Yala in South Darfur State. The mission strongly condemns this attack, which constitutes a violation of international law. It calls on the government of Sudan to swiftly apprehend the perpetrators and bring them to justice. We join the mission in extending our deepest condolences to the family of the peacekeeper, his colleagues, and the government of Nigeria. And the humanitarian coordinator in the Central African Republic, Najat Roshdi, today urged the international community to urgently rally behind humanitarians striving to assist thousands of civilians. Speaking at a briefing of member states in Geneva, Ms. Roshdi said the frequency and brutality of attacks in Bangassou, Bria, Alindao, and other localities have reached levels not seen since August 2014. There are deeply worrying signs of manipulation of religion as a driver behind the latest wave of attacks, she said, adding the window of opportunity to prevent the crisis from further escalation risks being shut down very soon. Ms. Roshdi warned that communities displaced by the renewed violence have sought safety in areas we can hardly reach. Aid workers are facing logistical and security challenges compounded by funding shortfalls. Unless humanitarian actors are given sufficient means, tens of thousands of the most vulnerable people will be cut off from aid. Many of them will be killed, and entire areas of the country may be abandoned, she warned. And from Somalia, the head of the UN mission there, Michael Keating, welcomed the discussions that took place earlier this week between the presidents of Puntland and Galmudug states to build peace in the central regions. The two state presidents agreed to end their dispute and promote constructive dialogue between their administrations. They're also committed to the opening of roads to allow free movement of people and goods. Mr. Keating reiterated the UN's readiness to support both presidents as well as Somalia's peace and state-building process. And we issued a statement yesterday, as you will have seen, announcing that the Secretary General has invited the Turkish Cypriot leader, Mustafa Akinci, and the Greek Cypriot leader, Nikos Anastasiadis, to New York for a joint meeting to discuss the Cyprus talks and the way forward. Both leaders have accepted the invitation. The Secretary General looks forward to welcoming the leaders together with his special advisor, Espen Barth Eide, on the evening of June 4th. And we'll keep you posted on the logistical and media arrangements surrounding that dinner. Also want to flag the first meeting today in Oslo of the parties to the agreement on port state measures to prevent, deter, eliminate illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. This international treaty, brokered by the FAO, aims at stopping rogue fishing practices by restricting port access to fishing vessels that fail to comply with a set of rules. It represents the capstone of years of diplomatic efforts to combat the scourge of illegal fishing, which amounts to 26 million tons and represents a huge threat to all efforts to bolster sustainable fishing in the world's oceans. More information from FAO. And today is a day that is dear to my heart in my house. It's the Global Day of Parents. The day honors parents throughout the world, providing an opportunity to appreciate all parents in all parts of the world for their selfless commitment to children and their lifelong sacrifice towards nurturing this relationship. I will get my children to hear this briefing. 12:30 here, President of the General Assembly, Peter Thompson, along with the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Wu Hongbo, to brief you ahead of the Oceans Conference. And then at 1 o'clock, President of the Security Council for the month of June, Ambassador Sasha Laurenti of Bolivia, will be here to brief you on the program of work. And at 2:30, there'll be a briefing sponsored by the African Union Commission on the launch of the African Women Leaders Network, a platform to enhance the leadership of women and the transformation of Africa with a focus on governance, peace, and stability. Tomorrow, 2017 UN Security Council elections will be held at 10 a.m. in the General Assembly Hall. Following the elections, we expect some of the ambassadors to address the press, and a stakeout will be set up outside of the GA Hall. And at 4 p.m., there'll be another briefing on the Ocean Conference with Alvaro Mendoza Emura, Permanent Representative of Portugal to the UN, and Bornam Gafour, the Permanent Representative of Singapore to these United Nations. This awkward silence means you get to ask questions. Yes, these are.
Okay. The town of Al-Awamiya in Saudi Arabia has been under constant bombardment and attacks by the security forces for the past 21 days at least. The United Nations, it seems, has not been following this. No statement I've heard about that so far. Why is this silence about such attacks?
I will check. I had not seen those reports, but I will check.
This proves my point, of course. In Yemen as well, a lady and her two daughters committed suicide today because...
Sorry, say again?
A lady in Yemen and her two daughters committed suicide today because of starvation. Does that, I mean, merit any statement from the United Nations?
I think I would urge you to read or reread the very powerful words delivered by Stephen O'Brien just 2 days ago in the Security Council, which clearly highlights our continued plea for a halt to the fighting and our continued concern with all the civilians in Yemen who are suffering from near starvation, cholera, diseases, lack of access to medicine, all because of a man-made crisis. This is not a natural disaster that has hit Yemen. This is a man-made crisis, and our efforts to find a political solution are continuing unabated, and our growing plea for the international community to support the people of Yemen has been consistent, and it has been loud.
Staying on Yemen. I'll
come back. I'll come back to you, Masood.
Thank you, Stéphane. On this today's recent Indians shelling inside Pakistan, killing civilians, and also this is the ongoing situation which between the two nuclear armed weapons. Is the Secretary General at any point in time try and take time out to assess the situation and talk to the leaders of the subcontinent?
I think the situation that we've seen in that area continues to be of concern to us, and as I said before, the Secretary General is following the situation very closely.
What about, I mean, but now, again, the killings are taking place of civilians by the Indian Army.
I've heard you, and as I said, we're watching this situation. Rami, and then Matthew.
Thanks, Steph. Just in a follow-up to a question I asked yesterday during the briefing regarding the Egyptian airstrikes in Libya. Does the SG have a position on them? The UN-backed Presidency Council there denounced them and called them a violation of their sovereignty.
We don't have a specific comment on that incident. Matthew.
To ask you about Myanmar again. I asked you yesterday about the video that it was published in the New York Times of the army beating up unarmed civilians, but also now the party, not just the government, but the party of Aung San Suu Kyi has reiterated that they have no intention of allowing the UN three-person panel in. So I'm wondering, on either of these two, do you have any comment?
On the video, we understand, we're aware of it. We understand that the government has announced an investigation into the incident. On the panel, I think we, as a matter of principle, we call on all countries to cooperate with the UN's human rights mechanism.
Can I ask you a rule? I wanted to ask you this, and you might. So as you know, Kenya Kang is seeking confirmation as Foreign Minister of South Korea. And the reason I'm asking you this question is that one of the issues that's come up is it's reported, not just by the media, but by those questioning her, that two people that worked for her in the UN system allegedly invested in her daughter's businesses. So what I wanted to know, without knowing whether this is in fact true, but it is being alleged in a formal confirmation hearing, is there any UN rule against a supervisor having an underling invest in a child's business venture?
I have no comment on these allegations. As for the staff rules, they're public, and the ethics rules are public, and you're free to consult them.
Right, but they're very vague. That's why I'm wondering.
I'm just saying I have no comment on these allegations. You can look at the rules. Abdelhamid.
Yes, on Thursday, a young Palestinian of 23-year-old was shot and killed by the settlers. And today, a 16-year-old girl was critically shot by the soldiers. These crimes, if they pass unnoticed, wouldn't send the wrong message to the Israeli occupation forces.
Well, we would call on any incident of violence, especially one where there's a death of a human being, of a civilian, to be fully investigated.
The second question, during the UN history, which is over 71 years, had been one state had been in violation of UN resolution and a breach of the UN Charter, had been rewarded except one single state, which is Israel. I just want you to give me one single example. When a country is found guilty of violating UN resolutions and UN Charter, and yet is rewarded.
I'm not going to comment on the premise of your question. The history of the UN is an open book, and everyone is free to consult it. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's interesting to compare what happens with regard to Israel and Palestine and what's going on with regard to the DPRK.
The compare and
Security
contrast
Council.
exercises.
Yeah, okay, but my
not for
question
me.
is different.
Yes.
My question is, on April 28th, the Secretary General said to the Security Council that it was very dangerous not to have channels of communication with the DPRK. The DPRK has asked different times to come to the Security Council, and the charter says when something comes up that involves them, they should be invited. None of this happens. They're not invited. And so I'm wondering if the Secretary General has pursued this statement of his, which seems very in line with the charter.
I think, first of all, that's a question. It's a good question for the briefer at 1 o'clock, the President's Security Council for the month of June. As I don't have the information as to why the representatives of DPRK have not been present at some of these Security Council briefings. So that's all I have to say on that.
Okay, the second part of that is the Pope has said that the UN should be doing something to reduce the tension. Has the Pope been in touch with the Secretary General, or the Secretary General in touch with the Pope about this?
Not that I'm aware, and not that I'm aware directly. Ali, Iftikhar.
Thank you, Stéphane. Any comments on President Trump's decision not to move the American embassy to Jerusalem for the time being?
No, I think we think the signing of the waiver and the decision taken today was a wise decision. Of course, the status of Jerusalem is a core issue where that can only be resolved through a negotiated political settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Secretary General hopes the decision can contribute to facilitating the resumption of a genuine peace process. Masuji.
Thank you. Stéphane, on this situation in Libya, with Egypt attacking inside Libya for whatever reason that it has, and with all the things that are happening, does the United Nations feel that it is time for Libya that Libya is becoming a failed state?
I think we take a more positive outlook, and I think the UN, through its special envoy, is working hard with the Libyan institutions to do whatever we can to help rebuild this country. Yes, sir. Yeah, you.
Does the SG have any comment on the possibility of the U.S. withdrawing from the Paris Agreement?
I think while I enjoy being the spokesman for the Secretary General, I think the Secretary General is his own best spokesman, and I would refer you to, I think, the very strong speech he delivered at NYU a couple of days ago. We're obviously waiting to see what the decision taken by the President that's announced for this afternoon. We have no more information about the nature of what the decision will be than you do, but I think the Secretary General's position on the importance of combating climate change, on the critical importance of the international community remaining united around the Paris Agreement, I think, is clearly spelled out in his speech. Mr. Lee.
Sure. Two questions on Morocco. One is there have been 6 days of protests in the Al Rif region following the crushing of a fishmonger, which obviously echoes what happened in Tunisia, and now the arrest of protest leader Nasser Zafafi. So I wanted to know, he's called for a 3-day strike. There are people, it's being reported all over the world. Is the UN or DPA aware of it, and do they have any words of wisdom for how it should be addressed?
No, I don't have anything on Morocco for you today.
Do you have any, on the envoy or the special advisor, I guess personal envoy on Western Sahara, has there been any response in terms of confirming?
I think we may be nearing the end of a process, so as soon as we have something to announce, we shall.
And the reason I wanted to ask you about Cameroon is that the visit is now, May is finished. You had said from this podium that Mr. Fall would be there in May and that this would be a follow-up on the issues of the Anglophone regions. Now it's June 1. What do you have to say about it?
I'm trying to get an update on his whereabouts. Nizar.
Yeah, yesterday a tanker was attacked near Bab el-Mandab in the Red Sea, in an area totally controlled by the coalition-led, the Saudi-led coalition. Is there any statement from them or explanation how this tanker came to be attacked by a boat?
No, we don't. I don't have any specific information or independent confirmation of the attack. What is clear is that we need to see a cessation of the violence.
It seems Bahrain is not heeding any of all the calls by Human Rights Council and by United Nations and cracking down on civil society, closing more societies, and also still the Mr. Qasim, Sheikh Qasim is still under siege by the government forces.
I didn't hear a question mark.
What do you have about Bahrain's? I mean,
I think
these
what we said last month about our concern for Bahrain remains the same. Masood.
Thank you. Does the United Nations think that Egypt's attack inside Libya to what you call to either recover or whatever to bring the people to justice inside Libya, is that legitimate?
Masood, with all due respect, Rami asked that question a few minutes ago. I answered. Yes, sir.
Sure, I have a question. One, I'd asked you yesterday about Espen Barth Ida, and I did see your amplification that he's when actually employed. Right. So I wanted to know, in these cases where there are envoys that are when actually employed, and this is, it's not, is it possible to know, just in the last, without getting into the specifics of his diplomacy, in the course of the last 365 days, how many days has he, and I'm saying it because it's public money, so I wanted to, I know there's a balance, so can you get that number?
We can see, I don't know if it's tabulated at the end of the year or when they're tabulated. If
however it's tabulated.
Yep. All right, I will get our guests. Thank you.